Welcome back to Klepper's Corner, Today in History. May 22nd is one of those dates where civilization looks less like a steady march forward and more like a group project where somebody brought a sword, a treaty, or a suspiciously confident engineering plan. Segment 1, and strong men meet the fine print. Today begins with the reminder that absolute power is only absolute until somebody close to you gets tired of your management style. In 192, Dong Zhuo, the warlord who had seized the Han court, deposed an emperor, burned Liu Yang, and treated China like his personal demolition derby, was lured to the palace by the promise that Emperor Zhan would hand him the throne. A cautious tyrant might inspect that invitation carefully, but Dong Zhuo heard "mandate of heaven" and apparently stopped reading after the buffet menu. At the gate, conspirators struck, and his adopted son, Liu Bu, finished him off, proving nepotism works beautifully until your favorite warrior notices the exit signs. The result was not restoration, but collapse. The Han court lost what little glue it had left, and the road to the three kingdoms opened like a trap door under the empire. Nearly 1,000 years later, Saladin learned the same lesson from the other side of the security desk. Besieging the assassins at Masyaf in 1176, he surrounded himself with guards, lights, chalk, and cinders to catch intruders. Then he woke to find a poisoned dagger and threatening note beside his head, while the chalk remained untouched. That is not an assassination attempt. That is a Yelp review from death. Saladin lifted the siege, made peace, and moved on to bigger targets. History's point is not that strong men are weak. It is that the human neck remains a surprisingly vulnerable branch of government. Segment 2, and kings discover paper cuts can bleed. Some rulers lose by battlefield defeat. Others lose because they signed something that looks boring enough to be safe. In 337, Constantine the Great, the emperor who had fused Roman power to Christianity, finally got baptized on his deathbed after decades of sponsoring the faith without technically joining the club. It was the ancient version of waiting until the last possible second to submit your paperwork. Except the clerk is God, and your file includes civil war, family executions, and an empire. He removed the imperial purple, put on white baptismal robes, and died as Rome's most consequential religious rebrand. Then, in 1200, King John of England signed the Treaty of Le Goulet with Philip II of France, buying temporary peace by acknowledging Philip as overlord for his French lands. John thought he was purchasing breathing room. Philip saw a legal crowbar. Within a few years, John's continental empire was unraveling. His nobles were furious, and the road to Magna Carta was open. By 1629, Christian IV of Denmark signed the Treaty of Lubeck after his Protestant intervention in the 30 Years' War collapsed. Oddly, he kept his territory, which is the diplomatic equivalent of driving your car into a lake and getting the insurance company to apologize to you. But the larger consequence was dangerous. Catholic victory made Emperor Ferdinand II overconfident, which helped pull Sweden into the war. These documents were not just parchment. They were delayed action explosives with nicer handwriting. Segment 3, and America invents the frontier and immediately needs lawyers. The American May 22nd file is a national origin story told by a cartographer, a prosecutor, a furious senator, a siege engineer, and a haunted real estate developer. In 1804, Lewis and Clark pushed off from St. Charles, Missouri, hauling a heavy keelboat up the Missouri River after the Louisiana Purchase doubled the country on paper. Jefferson wanted science, maps, trade routes, and sovereignty. The crew got mud, current, mosquitoes, and the Enlightenment with back pain. 3 years later, Aaron Burr, fresh off killing Alexander Hamilton while still vice president, was indicted for treason after allegedly trying to build a private Western empire. Chief Justice John Marshall's strict reading of treason required an overt act of war, not just vibes, boats, and dangerous ambition. Then came 1856, when Representative Preston Brooks beat Senator Charles Sumner with a cane on the Senate floor, after Sumner's anti-slavery speech. It was not a breakdown of civility. It was civility being dragged behind the building and introduced to a gold-headed stick. In 1863, the siege of Port Hudson began, and black soldiers of the Louisiana Native Guards fought with extraordinary courage, helping prove that the war for Union was also becoming a war for emancipation. In 1866, Winchester was founded, turning the frontier myth into a lever-action sales pitch. By 1872, Grant signed the Amnesty Act, returning political rights to most former Confederates in the name of healing, while black citizens faced the backlash. America kept expanding, litigating, shooting, forgiving, and forgetting, sometimes all before lunch. Segment 4, and the world learns that crisis management is panic with letterhead. Modern geopolitics on May 22nd has a habit of beginning with leaders calmly explaining why the thing they swore would not happen is now their entire foreign policy. In 1942, Mexico declared war on the Axis after German U-boats sank Mexican oil tankers in the Gulf of Mexico. Just a few years earlier, Mexico had been locked in bitter oil disputes with the United States and Britain. But war has a way of turning yesterday's economic rival into today's essential neighbor. Mexico's entry strengthened North American cooperation, fueled wartime labor programs, and sent the Aztec Eagles to fight in the Philippines. In 1947, Congress approved the Truman Doctrine, committing $400 million to Greece and Turkey, and turning the United States from a country trying to come home from war into a country signing a long-term lease on global responsibility. The language was about defending free peoples. The reality often meant backing deeply imperfect governments, because the alternative had a red flag and better slogans. Then, in 1972, Richard Nixon arrived in Moscow, the first sitting American president to visit the Soviet capital. 2 weeks earlier, he had escalated bombing in Vietnam and mined Haiphong Harbor. But there he was, with Leonid Brezhnev, signing arms agreements and smiling under Kremlin lights. That image is the Cold War in miniature. Two men trying to prevent nuclear apocalypse while actively making everything else worse. Diplomacy, at its best, is adults choosing not to end civilization. At its weirdest, it is champagne with the person whose missiles are pointed at your breakfast. Segment 5, and civilization meets things bigger than the schedule. Finally, May 22nd reminds us that even when humans are not overthrowing, signing, bombing, or suing each other, the universe still has notes. In 760, Halley's Comet passed close to the sun, terrifying skywatchers who saw a sword of fire instead of a predictable orbiting block of dirty ice. Their panic became useful data centuries later, helping astronomers prove comets followed mathematical paths rather than divine mood swings. In 1762, Rome inaugurated the Trevi Fountain, turning an ancient aqueduct into a Baroque spectacle, where public water arrived dressed like theater. Its most human detail may be the giant vase allegedly placed to block the view of an annoying barber who criticized the construction. Because civilization is marble, water, mythology, and one architect saying, "Fine, enjoy your wall." Then nature took the floor. In 1960, the Valdivia earthquake in Chile reached magnitude 9.5. The strongest ever recorded, shaking for 10 minutes and launching tsunamis across the Pacific. In 2011, the Joplin tornado carved through Missouri with EF5 force, destroying homes, businesses, and a hospital, and forcing emergency officials to rethink warnings. Between those disasters came quieter revolutions. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood premiered in 1967, proving children could handle silence better than executives could. Pac-Man appeared in Japan in 1980 and made eating dots a global pastime. And Johnny Carson signed off in 1992, closing the age when one late-night desk could gather the country. May 22nd says progress is real, but so are earthquakes, storms, ghosts, and network executives. In conclusion, May 22nd is a pretty efficient filing system for human behavior. Tyrants fall, kings sign away leverage, republics argue over violence, superpowers negotiate while bombing, and the planet occasionally interrupts with the subtlety of a bowling ball through a stained glass window. The recurring pattern is not that people fail to learn. It is that we keep learning just enough to build something impressive, then immediately test whether pride, fear, paperwork, or weather can knock it sideways. And usually, at least one of them can.